Marcus Aurelius. And the illusion of control. You think strength means control. That if you manage everything just right, your schedule, your relationships, your goals, then you'll feel safe. You'll finally rest. But you never do, because just when you think you've got it all in place, life shifts. Someone gets sick. A job ends. A plan fails. A friend changes. And suddenly, all the pieces fall. So you scramble harder. You try to control more. And the more you try, the more exhausted you feel. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He ruled an empire under pressure, led during plagues, betrayals, and wars. But, in his private journals, now called meditations, he whispered to himself, a truth most people never admit out loud. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This sentence isn't just philosophy. It's a challenge. Because your mind wants to believe that peace can be earned through control. But control is a fragile god. It demands everything and delivers. Nothing you chase perfect outcomes. But perfect never arrives. You beg people to understand you, but they're lost in their own storms. You rehearse conversations that never happen. You play the past like a movie, looking for where it all went wrong, and in the process, you lose the one thing you can influence, your presence. Marcus Aurelius didn't preach stoicism in comfort. He practiced it under siege, when everything outside him was in chaos. He turned inward, not to escape, but to lead from the only place not burning. He called it the inner citadel, a fortress within the soul that no event could penetrate. Not disease, not loss, not death. That's what you must build, an unshakable core that stays intact even when life disappoints you. Because life will, people will misunderstand you, plans will fall through, health will fade, moments will not go your way. But if your strength depends on the world cooperating, then your strength was never real. You become mentally unbreakable, not when you control everything, but when you realize you don't have to. That's the turning point, to shift your gaze from what can I fix out there, to what can I face in here. This is not passivity. It's power, redefined. The power to choose your response. The power to slow your breath. The power to hold your dignity when others lose theirs. That's the strength Marcus knew. So tonight, ask yourself, what have I been trying to control that was never mine? The past, the thoughts of others, the emotions of someone I love, the outcome of something uncertain. And what would happen if I released that need, not with resentment, but with clarity? You may feel lighter. You may feel grief. You may feel both. That's okay. Let it come. Let it teach you, because this is how it begins, not by gripping tighter, but by learning to let go, without falling apart. You're not giving up. You're stepping back into yourself. You're reclaiming the only place you've ever had power, your own mind. So ask yourself, if control was never the point, what deeper kind of strength have I been too afraid to practice? Epictetus and the weight you don't have to carry. You wake up heavy, don't you? Not always from grief, not always from pain, but from the endless, invisible weight of trying to hold everything together. You carry what they said, what they didn't say, what might happen, what could have happened, what never will. You carry their expectations, their moods, their silence. You carry your past like it still belongs to you, and you wonder why you can't breathe. But Epictetus, born into chains, scarred by reality, offers you a way to finally set it down. Some things are up to us, and some are not. That one line, spoken by a man who owned nothing, is enough to rebuild your entire nervous system. You see, the Stoics never told you not to feel. They told you not to suffer twice. And most of your suffering is not from what happened, but from what you keep telling yourself shouldn't have happened. The moment, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the failure. You play it on loop, as if your outrage might rewrite the past. But it won't. Epictetus invites you to split the world in two. What's yours, and what's not. That's the beginning of freedom. Your thoughts, yours. Your character, yours. Your choices, yours. Their opinion of you, not yours. Their love, not yours to demand. Their healing, not your responsibility. You've confused love with ownership, empathy with self-erasure, control with protection. And in doing so, you've walked away from the only place you ever had power. Your inner world. You think that if you care enough, worry enough, explain enough, you'll finally earn peace. But peace isn't earned through effort. It's uncovered through release. You are carrying so much that was never yours to begin with. It's not noble, it's not spiritual, it's not love. It's suffering disguised as service. You've become so used to anxiety that you've confused it with responsibility. But Epictetus would whisper, you are not responsible for what doesn't belong to you. Not their growth, not their timeline, not their interpretation of your truth. You think letting go is abandonment, but maybe it's trust. Trust that other people have their own path. Trust that pain has its place. Trust that not everything is yours to fix. He taught his students to walk with clarity, not control. To accept what is, not argue with what was. To anchor themselves inside, not chase safety outside. Even when insulted, Epictetus stayed calm. Even when wounded, he didn't wish harm, because his dignity didn't depend on how others treated him, but how he treated himself. He once said, it's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about them. So ask yourself, what story have you been feeding that's keeping you locked in pain? Is it the belief that it was your fault? That if you had done more, they wouldn't have left? That you must be small to be loved? These beliefs aren't facts. They're habits of suffering, and you can unlearn them. Right now, you are free to pause, to return to your breath, to feel the weight on your shoulders, to ask, is this mine? That question will save you, because once you stop claiming what was never yours, you reclaim what always was, your breath, your calm, your integrity, your attention. That's where your strength lives, not in the apology they never gave, not in controlling what they feel, not in becoming so likable that no one leaves. Strength lives in letting go without bitterness, letting others be wrong about you, letting the past be unedited, letting life unfold without your grip, strangling the beauty out of it. So tonight, imagine taking off the backpack, the one filled with memories, apologies, obligations, emotional debts. Put it down. You're not giving up. You're remembering that you were never meant to carry all of this. Let others carry their lessons. Let time do its job. Let silence speak what you no longer need to explain. You are still responsible for your courage, your kindness, your voice, but you are not responsible for their understanding, their change, or their closure. That's theirs. So, ask yourself, what weight am I still carrying? That was never mine to hold, and who might I become if I finally put it down, not in anger, but in peace? Seneca and the fear of time slipping away. There's a moment late at night when everything is quiet and you suddenly feel it. that strange, sinking fear that time is moving too fast and you're not living it right. You scroll, you plan, you distract. But deep down, the ache lingers. Am I wasting my life? Seneca, the Roman Stoic, an advisor to emperors, wrote letters to his friends about this very fear, not just to warn them, but to wake them up. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. This wasn't moral preaching. It was emotional surgery. Seneca watched powerful men obsess over status and die with regret. He saw artists distracted by applause, philosophers swallowed by routine. And in each case, they blamed time for what they never had the courage to face. That they chose comfort over meaning. That they ran from silence and called it productivity. That they numbed their days because presence hurt too much. Seneca believed time was not something you spend, but something you honor, because you are not promised years. You are not promised tomorrow. You are not even promised tonight. You live in minutes, in choices, in the soft space between distraction and attention. So the question becomes, where is your time going when you're not watching? Not just your calendar, not your obligations, the kind of time that builds a life or lets it slip through your fingers. You spend hours pleasing people you don't respect. You rehash arguments from 5 years ago. You binge the present to escape the weight of your unlived potential, and it adds up, not in days, but in lost selves. Seneca warned of this, that most people are not alive, they are just not dead, yet they drift. They fill their lives with things instead of thoughts, with stimulation instead of reflection, with noise instead of presence. And then they ask, where did the years go? But here's what's even more painful. You feel the loss while it's happening. That's the cruelty of time. It leaves traces. It whispers while it slips. You could be doing something real right now, and you don't listen, because listening would mean facing the truth that you've let fear, not passion, run the clock. You fear failure, so you delay. You fear judgment, so you perform. You fear missing out, so you never slow down long enough to notice what you've already missed. Seneca's remedy, not hustle, not urgency, but awareness. To be awake to how you're spending this hour. To know what matters and what only pretends to. He writes, people are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. You wouldn't give your money to someone careless. You wouldn't lend your home to someone reckless. So why do you give your time, your only non-renewable resource, to things that drain you? The fear of time slipping away is not irrational, it's sacred. It means you still care. It means some part of you still believes in something more. But that belief must become action, and action isn't always grand. Sometimes it's quiet, a pause before a yes, a refusal to argue, a moment spent watching the sky instead of your screen. You reclaim your time one brave boundary at a time. No to drama, no to fake urgency, no to living for weekends while dying 5 days a week. Seneca believed you must practice dying daily, not out of morbidity, but out of reverence, because when you remember that life ends, you finally learn how to begin it. So tonight, sit with this. You will never have this hour again, not this breath, not this version of you. It's all leaving, whether you notice or not. But if you notice, if you truly wake up, you can meet your life while it's still happening. You can stop rehearsing and start inhabiting your time. Not someday, not when things are easier now. So ask yourself, If I treated every hour like it was a small life of its own, what would I stop waiting for, and what would I finally start becoming? Heraclitus, and the peace of letting it flow. You want life to stay still, to make sense, to feel safe. You want your feelings to stay calm, your people to stay close, your identity to stay whole, but it never does. Everything moves, people drift, ideas shift. You change even when you resist it, and it terrifies you, because you were taught that stability is peace, that control is strength, that if you could just get everything to stay, you could finally rest. But Heraclitus, the philosopher of fire and flux, saw reality differently. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. The world moves, the self moves, all of it, flowing, burning, shifting, becoming. And the more you fight it, the more it hurts. You don't suffer because life changes. You suffer because you demand that it doesn't. You cling to relationships past their truth. You replay stories that no longer define you. You beg for answers in places that no longer speak your language, and it breaks you, not because the loss is unbearable, but because your resistance to the loss becomes your cage. Heraclitus would tell you, everything flows. Let your grief rise. Let it soften you. Let your identity evolve. Let it expand you. Let your beliefs break. Let them deepen you, because trying to hold still in a living river only drags you under. You're not meant to be fixed. You're meant to be faithful to the flow. That's the paradox. You find peace not by forcing things to stay, but by learning how to move with them. The relationship that ended wasn't a failure. It was a season, a chapter, a necessary current in your becoming. The job you lost wasn't your ruin. It was a release, a clearing, a redirection. The version of you that no longer fits doesn't need to be mourned. It needs to be thanked. You are not meant to be a monument. You are meant to be a river, and rivers, Heraclitus reminds us, don't cling to what they pass. They don't freeze in place to make someone comfortable. They flow, and they trust that flow. What would your life feel like if you stopped trying to hold everything still? What if you trusted that the people who are meant for you will swim beside you, not out of obligation, but out of shared direction? What if you let things end without making them bad? What if you let yourself change without needing to explain it? That's the peace of Heraclitus, to walk calmly through impermanence, not because it's easy, but because you've stopped expecting permanence in the first place. This isn't apathy, it's alignment. It's knowing that letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to stop gripping life by the throat. You don't need to hold it tighter. You need to move with it better, and in doing so, you become flexible where you were once brittle, compassionate where you were once controlling, rooted not in your circumstances, but in your response. Heraclitus teaches you that the real strength is not in resisting change, but in becoming fluent in it. So tonight, sit with this. What are you holding on to that no longer has breath? What are you trying to resurrect that already served its purpose? What story have you told yourself about what must stay so you don't have to face who you might become if it leaves? You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not falling apart. You are flowing, and if you let it, this flow can lead you not away from yourself, but back into a self you never knew you were allowed to be. So ask yourself, if I finally stopped trying to make everything stay, what new peace might rush in through the space I used to fill with my fear of change? Socrates and the power of not knowing. You've been taught to have answers, to be confident, to always know what to say, what to do, who you are. Uncertainty, that's weakness. Doubt, that's failure. Not knowing, that's shameful. And so you fake certainty, you perform stability, you build a life around being right, even when you're not. But deep down, you're tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of forcing clarity when all you feel is fog. Tired of acting like you're sure, when you're not even sure how to breathe right now. And that's where Socrates comes in, not to give you answers, but to give you permission. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. That's not a riddle. That's a revolution. Socrates wasn't admired for having the best theories or the loudest voice. He was feared, questioned, even executed because he refused to pretend he knew what others blindly accepted. He wandered the streets of Athens asking questions no one wanted to answer. He didn't claim authority, he dismantled it, because to him, the greatest threat to the soul wasn't ignorance. It was the illusion of knowledge, and you've been trained to cling to that illusion like a life raft. You want to be seen as competent, as figured out, as evolved. But inside, you're uncertain. You don't fully understand your past. You're not sure what you believe anymore. You question your own desires. That's not failure. That's honesty. Socrates would smile at your doubt. He'd say, "Good, now we begin." Because not knowing is not a dead end. It's an opening. It's a doorway to discovery. It's the only place real understanding begins. But it's terrifying, isn't it? To admit you don't know who you are. To admit you don't have the answers. To admit you're still learning when everyone around you seems so sure. But most people aren't wise. They're just loud. Most people aren't grounded. They're rehearsed. Most people aren't living. They're posturing. Socrates saw this, and he refused to play along. He stood in silence while others argued. He asked simple questions that exposed complicated lies. He embraced not knowing as a path to deeper clarity, because he understood something essential. Certainty is a wall. Curiosity is a window. You build your ego on what you know, but you build your soul on what you're willing to question. That's the power of not knowing. It softens you, it humbles you, it frees you from the exhausting role of being right, and it leads you to something even rarer. Wisdom. Wisdom doesn't need to win the argument. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't end the conversation with a mic drop. It begins the conversation with an open heart, and that openness, it's not weakness, it's strength in disguise, because you can't grow while pretending to already be complete. You can't hear truth if you're obsessed with being the speaker, and you can't evolve if you're too afraid to be wrong. So tonight, let yourself unravel a little. You don't need to have it figured out. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need to defend every version of yourself you've ever been. You just need to be honest. Admit, I don't know, and then ask, what might I learn? This is how real strength begins. Not with a rigid identity, but with the courage to remain open. So drop the armor. Let go of the performance. Stop trying to prove you're certain, and become something far more powerful. A seeker, Socrates would tell you. The examined life is the only one worth living, not because it's safe, but because it's real, and realness will always outlast performance. Ask yourself, what truth might I uncover if I finally stop pretending I already know who I am? Aristotle and the strength of repetition. You want to be strong, unshakable, disciplined, calm in the face of chaos, resilient through pain, but you're waiting for something dramatic to happen, a spark, an epiphany, a moment of sudden transformation. That's not how it works. Strength doesn't arrive like lightning. It grows like roots, invisible, quiet, relentless. Aristotle, one of the most influential minds in Western philosophy, understood this better than anyone. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. He didn't say we are what we feel, or what we promise, or what we dream about late at night. He said, we are what we repeatedly do. That means your character isn't built in extraordinary moments, but in ordinary ones. It's built in the seconds when no one is watching, when you could skip it, but don't, when you could lash out, but breathe instead, when you could quit, but stay one more day. Aristotle believed in virtue ethics, that the good life isn't something you stumble into, but something you practice every day, every choice, every moment. And here's what no one tells you. The repetition isn't glamorous. It's boring. It's quiet. It's uncomfortable. You'll meditate and feel nothing change. You'll exercise and still feel tired. You'll show up with integrity and be misunderstood. But you do it anyway, because repetition isn't about immediate reward. It's about becoming someone unrecognizable to your former self. You don't become mentally unbreakable by wanting it. You become mentally unbreakable by living like it's already true, again and again, especially when you don't feel like it. That's the paradox of mastery. You become powerful by learning how to repeat. You might think, but I'm not consistent. I get lazy, I forget. That's okay. Start again. Begin small. Anchor your worth not in grand ambition, but in the quiet refusal to abandon yourself. One push-up, one page read, one deep breath held when you want to scream. It counts. It all counts, because identity isn't shaped in declarations, but in repetition. Every time you choose courage over avoidance, compassion over resentment, discipline over impulse, you lay one more brick in the foundation of who you're becoming. Aristotle would tell you, don't chase perfection. Chase practice. Don't chase results. Chase repetition. And in time, you won't have to fake strength anymore. You'll have become it. But here's the catch. You won't feel different at first, because transformation is slow, and your mind is addicted to immediacy. You want fireworks. Aristotle gives you friction. He asks, can you choose the right thing even when no one claps? Can you return to your path even when you've stumbled? He knew that habit isn't just muscle memory, it's moral memory. The more you practice courage, the more naturally it comes. The more you train discipline, the more quickly it returns. The more you live with integrity, the less you tolerate lies, even from yourself. You don't need motivation. You need rhythm, a rhythm of rising when you fall, of moving when you freeze, of returning when you drift. Repetition is not punishment, it's remembrance. It reminds you, you are not helpless. You are not your worst moment. You are what you choose, again and again and again. And in that choosing, you build something no one can take from you. Not a reputation, not an identity, but a spine, a way of standing in the world that does not collapse with pressure. So tonight, forget the big plan, forget the 5-year vision, forget waiting to feel ready. Ask one question: what small thing can I repeat today that my future self will thank me for? That's enough. That's the seed. And if you water it daily, without fanfare, without rush, it will become the forest you one day walk through and realize, this is who I am now. not because I said it, but because I lived it, one quiet, repeated choice at a time. So ask yourself, what strength have I been postponing by waiting for motivation instead of trusting the power of simple, sacred repetition? Nietzsche and the fire that refines you. There's a part of you that wants to avoid the fire, that still believes the purpose of life is to be comfortable, safe, unshaken. You've been taught to pray for peace, to seek out soft landings, to surround yourself with reassurance. But Friedrich Nietzsche, the madman prophet of pain and power, saw something deeper. He didn't tell you to avoid the fire. He told you to walk into it. What does not kill me makes me stronger. It's the line everyone quotes, but almost no one truly understands, because they forget the context. They forget that Nietzsche wasn't writing from strength, but from suffering. He was sick, exiled, mocked, alone, writing in silence while the world called him insane. And yet, from that isolation, he crafted some of the most powerful philosophy ever written, not by avoiding suffering, but by interrogating it. You want to be unbreakable? Then you must first be willing to break. You must be willing to lose what you think you are, your certainty, your roles, your false confidence, and let pain burn away everything that isn't real. Nietzsche didn't glorify pain. He weaponized it. He saw suffering not as a flaw in life, but as its very engine. He wrote, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." Your pain is not a punishment. It is a process. It is the friction that wakes you up, the blade that sharpens your clarity, the mirror that shows you what's still holding you hostage. But most people run, they numb, they distract, they avoid. They decorate the prison, but you are ready to turn and face it, to walk into the fire, not to be consumed by it, but to be forged within it. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are. Not comfort, not perfection, but transformation. You do not become strong by staying intact. You become strong by falling apart and finding what survives. You want mental strength? Then start asking better questions. What is this pain trying to teach me? What lie is it forcing me to confront? What mask is it burning off? Nietzsche didn't offer optimism. He offered honesty. He believed the truth, however painful, was always better than illusion. That's what most people can't bear. Not the pain, but the clarity it brings. Because when you stop running from your suffering, you realize how many of your dreams were built on fear, how many of your relationships were rooted in performance, how many of your goals were escapes in disguise. But when you let the fire do its work, you emerge with something untouchable, self-possession, the kind of groundedness that doesn't flinch in failure, the kind of presence that doesn't collapse under pressure, the kind of strength that has nothing left to prove. Nietzsche called this kind of person the Bermensch, not a superhuman in body, but one who had transcended the need to be seen as strong, a person who had built their values from the ashes of their old ones, a person who could stand alone and not feel lonely. You don't become that by reading quotes. You become that by enduring the refining process, by staying conscious inside discomfort, by not turning away when the world doesn't clap, by rising from your own ruins without bitterness. So tonight, don't resist the fire. Don't numb it. Don't fear it. Let it ask you what you still believe about yourself. That's keeping you small. Let it reveal what parts of you still depend on external validation to exist. Let it destroy what was never yours to begin with, because what remains will be real, not performative, not borrowed, not delicate. You, raw, refined, and finally unbreakable. So ask yourself, what part of me is still clinging to comfort, when the fire is offering me a transformation far deeper than peace, the kind of strength that no applause, no failure, no person can ever take away. Lao Tzu and the strength of letting go. You've been taught that strength is hard, that it clenches its fists, that it holds the line, that it pushes, resists, dominates. But Lao Tzu, the ancient sage of the Tao, offered a quieter form of power, a strength that flows instead of forces, that bends instead of breaks, that lets go instead of holding on. Water is fluid, soft, and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft, and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. You think letting go is weakness, but what if it's the highest form of mastery? Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching isn't a guidebook for control, it's a poem of surrender. Not to despair, but to harmony. He didn't tell you to win every battle. He told you to stop fighting the current, because you're not broken by what happens. You're broken by your resistance to it. The Tao, the way, isn't something you conquer. It's something you return to, like a river, like breath, like stillness. But you've been taught to resist flow, to grip what's fading, to chase what's leaving, to define yourself by what you can hold on to, and yet everything keeps slipping through your fingers. No wonder you're exhausted. You weren't meant to carry all of this. You were meant to release. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You stop confusing control with love, effort with worth, tension with meaning. True strength, Lao Tzu says, is found in yielding, in responding, not reacting, in allowing, not forcing, in trusting, not chasing. It's the strength of water carving mountains over time, of trees bending in the wind so they do not break, of silence that doesn't need to defend itself to be true. Letting go isn't an act of abandonment. It's an act of deep alignment with time, with nature, with yourself. But letting go isn't easy. It means grieving. It means becoming intimate with uncertainty. You'll want to hold on to stories, to people, to identities that made you feel safe, even when they were quietly hurting you. You'll want to cling to the illusion that you're in control. But, Lao Tzu whispers, by letting it go, it all gets done. The world is won by those who let it go. This is not passivity. It's participation without violence. It's action without ego. Movement without force. Decision without desperation. When you let go, you stop bracing against life and start dancing with it. You meet each moment with openness, not with armor. You say yes to change, not as a threat, but as a rhythm. You become mentally unbreakable, not because you dominate the chaos, but because you stop fearing it. You trust yourself to move with it, to stay soft where others go hard, to remain whole where others fracture. You stop trying to be invincible. You start becoming invulnerable in the way that only soft things can be. Water cannot be cut, the wind cannot be held, and a soul that has stopped clinging cannot be shattered. So tonight, ask yourself, what am I still holding on to out of fear? Not love, a story of who I used to be. A relationship that no longer reflects me. A goal that was never mine to begin with. And what part of me already knows that freedom is waiting, not in the next achievement, but in the release. Carl, Jung, and the shadows you must integrate. You spend your life trying to be good, good enough, good for them, good for yourself, good in public, good even when you're breaking inside. But Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, warned that the path to true strength doesn't lie in being good. It lies in being whole. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You think the goal is to become better, but Jung says the goal is to become real, to look at every part of yourself, especially the parts you've buried, rejected, disowned. Your anger, your insecurity, your craving for control, your hunger for validation, your capacity for harm. These are your shadows, the unconscious drives that rule you when you're not paying attention. The more you ignore them, the more power they hold. They show up in your relationships, in your sabotage, in your patterns, in your projections. You hate in others what you've never forgiven in yourself, and that's the trap. You try to be mentally strong by suppressing your dark sides, but all that does is make them stronger and sneakier. Jung's path is different. It's not about self-improvement, it's about self-confrontation. To become unbreakable, you must stop pretending. You must meet the beast in the basement and name it, not to become it, but to no longer be controlled by it. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your neglected twin. It holds your vitality, your passion, your courage, but only when integrated. You cannot reject half your psyche and expect to feel whole. You cannot shame your way into peace. You must go into the cave, into the unconscious, into the stories you've avoided, and sit with them, understand them, ask them what they want, because they are part of you. And the more you exile them, the more lost you feel. You wonder why you explode, why you withdraw, why you attract the same people, why you keep hurting yourself with your own thoughts. It's because your shadow is acting in your place, because you haven't faced it yet. But once you do, once you stop running, you gain a kind of clarity that can't be taught. You begin to say, yes, I have rage. Yes, I feel jealousy. Yes, I want power. Yes, I have wounds. Yes, I sometimes lie. Yes, I am not who I pretend to be. And yet, I am still worthy of my own compassion. That's where strength begins. Not with denial, but with radical ownership. The world teaches you to hide. Jung teaches you to integrate, to become someone whose darkness is no longer repressed, but reconciled, so that your strength doesn't come from pretending, but from knowing exactly what you are and choosing to act from your highest self anyway. The shadow doesn't disappear, but once it's conscious, you can work with it. You stop being afraid of your impulses. You start understanding them. You stop judging others for their flaws. You begin seeing your own in theirs. You stop needing perfection in yourself and in others, and that is the foundation of peace. Not the absence of darkness, but the presence of inner truth. So tonight, ask yourself, what part of me have I been afraid to see, and what might happen if I met that part with curiosity instead of shame? Because to be mentally unbreakable is not to be light all the time. It's to hold your light and your shadow in the same breath and walk forward. Hold Seneca and the courage to face death. You don't want to think about it. Death, the end, the final silence, the vanishing of everything you've loved, feared, built, suffered, hoped for. You push it out of your mind, as if avoidance will make it less real. But Seneca, the Stoic poet of mortality, believed that, to truly live, you must look death directly in the face every single day. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books every day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. To Seneca, death wasn't a terror to be avoided. It was a mirror, a teacher. The ultimate Clarifier. It strips away your excuses. It slices through your endless plans. It reveals what actually matters and exposes what never did. You think you're too busy to live fully, too overwhelmed to rest, too behind to stop striving. But Seneca would ask, behind what? You act as if you'll live forever. You talk about next year like it's promised. You save your honesty for later. You delay your joy until you've earned it. But life doesn't owe you more time, and death doesn't negotiate. This isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to awaken you, because everything changes when you start living with the end in mind. You stop chasing applause. You stop resenting imperfection. You stop postponing the little moments, the walk, the conversation, the sunset, the silence. You realize you don't need more time. You need more presence. You become mentally unbreakable, not by denying death, but by befriending it, because once you accept that you will die and that it could be any day, you finally start to live on purpose. You forgive faster. You speak more directly. You laugh louder. You let go of things that are heavy, because there's no time to carry what isn't real. Seneca wrote letters to his friends about death, not to depress them, but to sharpen their focus. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. You waste time scrolling, worrying, waiting for permission. You hoard your creativity. You delay your healing. You withhold your love because you think you'll get another chance. But death humbles you. It reminds you this moment is the only thing you ever truly own. Seneca wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of never fully living, so he trained himself to let go, to practice poverty, to embrace discomfort, to write not for fame, but for freedom. He knew that a person who's made peace with death can no longer be manipulated, not by praise, not by fear, not by regret. That is true power. Because when you stop fearing the end, you stop fearing everything else. You stop chasing people who don't see you. You stop begging for time that won't return. You stop living as if your life is a rehearsal for something better later. This is it, now so tonight. Pause, look around. Not with panic, but with reverence. Who would you speak to differently if you knew it was the last time? What would you say? What would you stop postponing? This isn't morbid, it's sacred. The awareness of death is the birthplace of meaning. So, ask yourself, if I were to die tomorrow, what unfinished part of me would ache the loudest? And what would it mean to begin living so that I'm no longer afraid to let go? Aristotle and the strength of right action. There's a kind of strength that doesn't shout, that doesn't need to win arguments, that doesn't depend on mood, motivation, or momentum. It's the strength of right action, of doing what must be done, not because you feel like it, but because it is right. And no one understood this quiet discipline more than Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. He didn't care how you felt. He cared what you did. He wasn't obsessed with ambition. He was obsessed with virtue, not as a performance, but as a practice. In a world chasing outcomes, Aristotle taught that character is destiny, that your daily choices, small, invisible, unglamorous, are the architecture of your soul. That courage is not a mood, it's a behavior. That justice is not a theory, it's a habit. That kindness is not a personality, It's a choice repeated until it becomes reflex. You want to be mentally unbreakable. Start showing up, especially when no one is watching. That's when you're training your real self, the one not built on applause or adrenaline. Aristotle believed in eudaimonia, not happiness as a fleeting feeling, but as flourishing. And flourishing happens when your actions align with your values. Over time, without exception, not just when it's easy, not just when it's convenient, but when it's right. He taught that every virtue lives between two vices. Courage isn't reckless aggression or passive cowardice. It's the middle path. Generosity isn't giving too much or too little. It's the balance. Temperance isn't abstinence or indulgence, it's mastery. You are constantly shaping your identity by the choices you make under pressure. Every time you act in alignment with your values, you become more stable, more grounded, more unshakable, and every time you betray your own conscience, even slightly, you become weaker, more fragmented, more dependent on external validation to feel whole. Right action is not glamorous. It's not always rewarded, but it's always refining. It builds an internal compass that doesn't get lost in chaos. When you know what's right, you don't need a script. You don't need applause. You don't need the perfect conditions. You just act, because that's who you are. This is not about moral perfection. It's about moral commitment. Aristotle didn't expect you to be flawless. He expected you to be disciplined, to reflect, to practice, to improve, because virtue isn't inborn. It's built through repetition, through integrity, through action, especially when it's hard. You will be tempted to choose the easier path, to lie, to avoid, to indulge, to silence your own knowing. But every time you choose the harder path, the right path, you grow in invisible strength. Strength no one can give you, and no one can take away. So tonight, ask yourself, where am I compromising what I know is right? And what would it look like to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start practicing the person I quietly know I'm meant to become? Epictetus. And the choice you always have. There's a moment, maybe you felt it, when everything seems to collapse inward. The job falls through. The message doesn't come. The people you relied on disappear, or worse. They stay, but not as who they used to be. You feel helpless, like a leaf in a storm, spun and flung across a sky that doesn't care. You try to brace yourself with logic, reassurance, plans, but nothing sticks. And somewhere deep in your chest, a quiet question grows louder. What now? This is where most people break, not from pain itself, but from the belief that they no longer have a say in it, that they are now victims of life's cruelty, spectators in their own story. But Epictetus, born into slavery, crippled as a child, who later became one of Stoicism's clearest voices, taught something most people don't want to hear. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. At first, that might sound dismissive, cold, even cruel. But it's not. It's a key, a lifeline, because what Epictetus saw, and what you must begin to see, is that the greatest strength you will ever have is not in controlling what life does to you, but in reclaiming what you do with what's been done. He couldn't control his status. He couldn't escape his condition. He couldn't choose how others treated him. But he could choose whether he remained free inside his own mind. He could choose what he told himself about his pain, and so can you. You think freedom means having options, but real freedom is the ability to meet hardship without handing over your dignity. Epictetus spoke of the discipline of assent, the act of choosing which thoughts you allow to stay. Not every thought deserves your belief, Not every feeling needs your obedience. Not every fear tells the truth. You are allowed to pause, to interrogate your narratives, to say, no, this does not serve me. And in doing so, you begin to break the chain that suffering tries to wrap around your neck. Maybe tonight your thoughts are heavy. Maybe your body aches with exhaustion that has no name. Maybe something you were counting on didn't come through again. You are still allowed to choose, not to fake a smile, not to pretend you're fine, but to respond instead of react. To breathe before the spiral, to observe before the collapse, to remember that no matter how powerless you feel, your mind is still your own. It doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means you stop making it your identity. You can feel betrayal without becoming bitter. You can feel grief without drowning in it. You can lose what you loved and still be someone worth loving. Epictetus taught that the only thing truly yours in this world is your power to choose how you meet it. That means you are not defined by your failures. You are not reduced to your wounds. You are not sentenced to live in the echo of your worst moment. You are not helpless, you're just tired. You are not broken, you're just grieving. You are not weak, you're just human and being. Human means you get to begin again, not by rewriting the past, but by reclaiming the present. Epictetus wouldn't have told you to chase comfort. He would have told you to chase clarity, to strip away what's outside your control, and return to the one place you still have power, your mind, tonight. That power might look like something small. Maybe it's the decision not to check your phone again. Maybe it's letting yourself cry instead of explaining it away. Maybe it's whispering, I don't know what comes next, but I won't abandon myself this time. That's all it takes. One thread of self-respect, woven through your response, to begin rebuilding your strength. You are not here to win every battle. You are here to stop betraying yourself in the process. You don't need to have the right words. You don't need to feel strong. You just need to ask, if nothing outside of me is mine, then how gently, how fiercely, how wisely will I care for what still is? Seneca and the calm in the face of chaos. You brace yourself for life's big disasters, the heartbreaks, the diagnoses, the failures. But most of what breaks you isn't loud. It's the slow erosion, the chronic stress, the fear of what might happen next. You live like a clenched fist, tight around every possibility you didn't ask for, and yet, most of it never even happens. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher and advisor to emperors, was surrounded by chaos, politics, betrayal, exile, conspiracies. He knew life could turn on a whisper, but he also knew this: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Let that settle into your nervous system for a moment. You're exhausted not just from what's happened, but from what your mind projects could happen. You play out every worst-case scenario. You rehearse every rejection, every failure, every loss. You punish yourself with possibilities, and each time your body responds like it's real. Your breath shortens, your stomach tightens. Your heart rushes to defend you from a future that hasn't arrived. Seneca didn't deny that life can be cruel. He just refused to let the fear of cruelty rob him of peace now. Mental strength isn't the absence of fear. It's your refusal to let fear take the driver's seat. You've learned to catastrophize, to think preparation means obsession, that if you worry hard enough, maybe you can stop bad things from happening. But worry doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you. Seneca trained his mind like a muscle. He practiced premeditatio, malorum, the premeditation of evils, not to feed anxiety, but to cut it off at the root. He imagined what could go wrong, not to suffer it in advance, but to disarm it. What if you lost your job? You would adapt. What if someone leaves you? You would grieve, and you would heal. What if your worst fear came true? You would be cracked open, and still find breath. Seneca's point wasn't to become numb. It was to remember that you are more durable than your fears suggest. Fear exaggerates. Calm evaluates. One makes you small. The other makes you ready. Tonight, maybe your thoughts are darting backward to regret, forward to anxiety, sideways to distractions that promise comfort but never deliver it. You're allowed to pause, to pull the emergency brake on your spinning thoughts, to say, not now. You are not required to live in anticipation of loss. You are not obligated to prove your strength through constant tension. Sometimes, strength is found in softening your shoulders, in breathing deeply, in choosing not to panic over a possibility you can't predict. Seneca believed the wise person keeps their calm in chaos because they've already made peace with uncertainty. That doesn't mean you expect bad things. It means you stop expecting yourself to be invincible when they happen. You begin to trust something softer, your adaptability, your inner resourcefulness, your capacity to face pain without self-abandonment. You don't need to know what's next. You just need to stay close to yourself when it comes. Maybe you can't stop the storm, but you can stop handing it your peace in advance. Let the moment return to its center. Let your breath lengthen. Let the tension dissolve, even if only for now. Let the fear shrink back into a shape you can hold, and ask yourself, if I stopped living in the shadow of what might go wrong, what quiet joys have I been too afraid to notice right now? The Buddha and the space between emotion and reaction. Some emotions arrive like storms: anger, shame, panic. They barrel in before you can brace yourself. You say things you don't mean. You become someone you swore you weren't. Then later you wonder, why did I let that take me over? We all have moments like this. Moments when our nervous system fires before our wisdom can catch up. Moments when we confuse urgency with truth. The Buddha, not a god, not a prophet, but a deeply observant human, devoted his life to understanding this space. The space between what you feel and what you do with it. He saw that suffering wasn't caused by pain alone, but by our automatic reaction to it. He taught, you will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. In other words, the emotion itself isn't your enemy. It's the unconscious reaction that follows it. Think about the last time you felt rejected. Did you pause and breathe, or did you spiral and ruminate? The last time someone triggered you, did you respond with clarity, or did you lash out, retreat, or shrink? This isn't judgment. It's gentle awareness. The Buddha observed that the mind, left unchecked, will grab every passing thought and turn it into a belief, a reaction, a habit. But through mindfulness, deep, deliberate presence, you begin to notice something shocking. You are not your emotions. You are the witness of them. When a thought arises, I'm not good enough, you don't have to follow it. You can bow to it like a passing guest and let it go. When anger bubbles up, you don't have to become its weapon. You can feel its fire without burning the world around you. This is not suppression. This is mastery. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let every feeling pilot the ship. The Buddha called this liberation, freedom from being enslaved by your own reactivity. Imagine your mind like a muddy river. Every thought and emotion is a ripple. When you stir it, The mud clouds the water, but if you sit, wait, and breathe, the water clears. The clarity was always there beneath the storm. Tonight, you don't have to solve every emotion. You don't have to justify your pain or hide your sorrow. You only need to watch it, gently, without attachment. Notice the fear. Notice the story that says, "I'll always feel this way." Notice the clench in your chest. And do nothing, just observe. Let the story lose its grip. Let the waves pass. The Buddha didn't promise that life would stop hurting. He promised that you didn't have to be ruled by the hurt. That is unbreakable peace, not invincibility, but non-reactivity. Imagine how your life would change if you responded to pain with awareness instead of reflex. If you greeted insecurity with patience, grief with breath, conflict with stillness, you'd stop leaking your power. You'd stop feeding the very thing you want to overcome, and you'd remember the most important truth of all. This feeling is not final. It's a weather pattern. It's passing through, and you are the sky, so ask yourself, in stillness, tonight, if I stopped reacting to every storm, what quiet wisdom inside me has been waiting to be heard all along? Nietzsche and the fire beneath your pain. You've been taught to avoid pain, to treat discomfort like a malfunction, to escape it, numb it, bury it beneath distraction. But what if pain isn't the enemy? What if it's the doorway? Friedrich Nietzsche, radical, defiant, often misunderstood, refused to see suffering as meaningless. He believed that what breaks you can also forge you. If you're willing to face it without flinching, he wrote, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Most people never do. They run from the wound. They demand comfort from the world. They imagine strength means not feeling it, but Nietzsche saw something deeper. He saw that the people who endured the most and don't turn bitter often carry a strange light inside them, a depth, a fire. Not because they were spared pain, but because they let the pain transform them. You've felt that fire, haven't you? That moment when everything was falling apart, and yet something inside you, something raw and quiet, refused to quit. That wasn't luck. That wasn't coincidence. That was your will to power. The inner force Nietzsche believed lived in every soul. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to become, to evolve, to rise, not in spite of the wound, but through it. Pain cracks your shell, but it also cracks open your potential. You don't become unbreakable by being untouched. You become unbreakable by becoming unafraid of breaking. Nietzsche even welcomed pain, not masochistically, but because he knew that pain carves out space for something new. Growth, creation, clarity, conviction. He believed that to avoid pain is to avoid transformation, that comfort, when worshipped, becomes a cage. So if you're hurting tonight, not just mildly aching, but deeply breaking, pause. Before you run from it, before you silence it, before you scroll or swallow or sink into distraction, ask, what is this pain asking me to become? Because Nietzsche knew, pain is not the punishment, it is the invitation to rebuild your life from truth. Instead of performance, to stop playing small just to avoid rejection, to stop repeating patterns that protect you from growth. It is the moment you meet yourself at the edge of what you thought you could endure, and if you stay in that space without abandoning your heart, something sacred begins to rise. Not perfection, but power. A kind of soul fire that cannot be faked. You become the kind of person who walks into chaos with eyes open, with a steady spine, with nothing to prove, and nothing left to lose but illusions. This is not easy. This is not glamorous. It is painful, and honest, and worth it, because what emerges from pain faced with courage is not just strength, it's authenticity. You no longer live for approval. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You no longer seek shelter in roles or rules or rewards. You live with depth, with hunger, with aliveness. You become, as Nietzsche called it, a creator of values, someone who defines meaning for themselves, not because they've never been broken, but because they've built something real from the rubble. Tonight, don't run from the ache. Sit with it, name it, feel where it lives in your chest, and then ask yourself with honesty, if this pain was the beginning of my transformation, what version of me is trying to be born through this fire? Lao Tzu and the power of yielding. You've been told that strength means resistance, that to survive this world, you must harden, clench your jaw, hold your ground, never bend, but some things break because they refuse to bend. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese sage and founder of Taoism, saw something the world often overlooks, that true strength is not rigid, it is fluid, he wrote. Water is fluid, soft and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft, and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox. What is soft is strong. You are not unbreakable because you are made of steel. You are unbreakable because you know when to let go. Lao Tzu taught that life flows like a river, not in straight lines, not in fixed destinations, but in rhythms, spirals, and seasons. Trying to force life to obey you only creates resistance, tension, suffering. But if you move with life, if you surrender to the flow, you begin to sense something deeper than control, harmony. This is not the same as passivity. It is not giving up. It is wisdom. The wisdom to stop forcing outcomes, to stop clinging to what's slipping, to stop mistaking rigidity for resilience. Yielding is not weakness. It's choosing presence over pride, trust over fear. Think of the trees that survive storms. They do not fight the wind. They bend with it. Now think of the tension you're holding. Right now, in your jaw, your stomach, your mind. What part of you is trying to control the uncontrollable? Lao Tzu would tell you, drop it, let it go. Flow around the obstacle instead of smashing against it. You've been taught that if you loosen your grip, you'll lose everything. But what if loosening your grip is the only way to receive what's meant for you? You want to be in control, but what you really need is to be in alignment. Alignment with reality, with your nature, with the present moment. When you force, you exhaust. When you flow, you renew. This is the Tao, not a religion, not a doctrine, but a way of being, a way of breathing, softer, listening deeper, moving slower, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer fighting it at every turn. Unbreakable does not mean you never fall. It means you fall with grace. You rise without bitterness. You adapt without losing your essence. Tonight, release the war inside your mind. The war with time, with regret, with expectation. Return to the river. Let the water teach you that you don't have to force your way forward. You only have to stop resisting where you are. Breathe, unclench, soften, and ask yourself gently, if I stopped fighting the current, where might life carry me that my mind could never have imagined? Viktor Frankl and the last of human freedoms. There's a kind of suffering that empties you, not the loud kind, but the quiet, endless ache. The kind that strips you of hope, of meaning, of reason to get up again. You ask yourself, what's the point? And for a moment, you don't have an answer. Viktor Frankl lived in that space. He lost his family in the Holocaust. He survived Auschwitz, not because he was the strongest physically, but because of a different kind of strength. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing. He wrote the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude. In any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. He watched people die. He watched people turn cruel to survive. And yet, he found something that couldn't be touched by brutality, meaning, Frankl believed that humans can survive almost anything as long as they have a reason, not a reason given to them, but a reason they create, a personal why that transforms pain into purpose. He called it logotherapy, the therapy of meaning. It doesn't erase suffering. It reframes it. It asks not, how can I escape this pain? But what is this pain asking of me? In the camps, those who lost their reason for living gave up. But those who held on to a purpose, even if it was a loved one, a book unwritten, a dream deferred, had a kind of fire inside them that death couldn't extinguish. Tonight, maybe your soul feels flat. Maybe the weight of daily existence has dulled your sense of direction. Maybe you're grieving something you can't name. You're not broken. You're just waiting for meaning to re-enter the room. And it always does. But not with a trumpet. Not with fireworks. It whispers. It shows up in a question. What is this asking me to become? It shows up in a decision. I will carry this pain with dignity. It shows up in a spark. Maybe someone else can feel less alone because I survived this. Frankl wasn't naive. He didn't deny the horror. He looked it in the eye and still chose to believe in meaning. Not because life owed him something, but because meaning was his to create. That is unbreakable, not control, not avoidance, but the radical power to give your suffering a voice to say, this will not be wasted. This will shape me into someone deeper, wiser, truer. So tonight, you don't have to numb the pain. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You only need to ask, if meaning is my last freedom, what kind of life will I choose to build even from the ashes of this one? Aurelius and the art of inner citizenship. You wake up to noise. Not just the alarm, not just the notifications, but the psychological noise of what you should be doing, of what others might be thinking, of how much time you're running out of dot, and before your feet even touch the ground, you're already behind. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, philosopher, and reluctant ruler, lived surrounded by chaos, war, betrayal, political pressure, plague, and yet his journal, now known as Meditations, reads, like a manual on how to protect your inner country when the outer world falls apart. He didn't write it for an audience. He wrote it to himself, to remind himself of what can't be taken. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You scroll your feed. You compare. You panic. You spiral. And it feels like everyone else has the map, while you're stuck with a blank page and a broken compass. But Aurelius knew something modern life tries to make you forget. Your peace is not dependent on your environment. It's anchored in your philosophy. He would start the day reminding himself, today, I will meet people who are selfish, cruel, greedy, deceptive, not because he was cynical, but because he didn't want to be surprised by the behavior of the world. He knew that if you don't prepare your mind, the world will shape it for you. If you don't guard your inner fortress, everything from traffic to comments to failure will tear down your clarity. Aurelius didn't aim for comfort. He aimed for virtue. He saw life as a test of character, a series of chances to respond with wisdom, even when the world offers none. Maybe today you felt disrespected. Maybe someone disappointed you. Maybe you disappointed yourself, and now the shame has curled around your mind like smoke. But Marcus would tell you this: you can begin again. Right now, not with revenge, not with perfection, but with composure, with the question, what would my highest self do next? Stoicism isn't cold. It's clear. It reminds you. You don't need the world to be kind to be kind. You don't need everything to go right to do the right thing. And you don't need to feel strong to be strong. Marcus practiced negative visualization, imagining loss, imagining hardship, not to wallow, but to remind himself, everything you love is temporary. So love it well and release it gently. Tonight, maybe your mind is trying to control what can't be controlled. Maybe you're reliving a conversation, rehearsing a future, resisting what already is. Come back to the fortress. You are not your calendar. You are not your title. You are not your failures or successes. You are the custodian of your inner life, and that is where real power lives. Aurelius ruled an empire, but the kingdom he cared about most was the one inside his own chest. So ask yourself, when the world gets loud, if I ruled my inner world with the same dignity I expect from others, what kind of peace might I carry into the chaos? Carl Jung and the shadow you refuse to face. There's a part of you you pretend doesn't exist. You bury it under politeness. You silence it with productivity. You disown it with positive thinking, but it waits in the quiet moments, in your overreactions, in the dreams that make no sense until they do. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and depth psychologist, called this the shadow, the hidden parts of yourself you've rejected, the impulses you've judged, the emotions you've shamed. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he warned, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most people never meet their shadow. They just keep reliving it through the relationships they sabotage, the anger they project, the chaos they unconsciously attract. But Jung knew you do not become whole by being good. You become whole by being honest. The truth is, your shadow is not evil, it is unloved. It is the part of you that was told to stay quiet, the part that got punished for feeling too much, the part that learned to perform to survive. You became nice at the cost of becoming real, and now, under stress or pain, the mask slips and the shadow speaks. Through jealousy, through bitterness, through withdrawal, it asks, when will you stop pretending? Jung didn't want you to become a saint. He wanted you to become complete, to admit that your light means nothing if it's built on a lie. You are capable of cruelty. You are capable of self-sabotage. You are capable of judging others to protect your own insecurity. And none of that makes you unworthy. It makes you human. Your strength is not in suppressing your shadow, it's in integrating it, in saying, yes, this is part of me, but it no longer controls me in secret. This is what makes you mentally unbreakable, not perfection, but inner alignment. Most people spend their lives trying to be liked. Few ever become real, but those who do, they walk with a grounded kind of peace. They don't overreact, because they've already met the part of them that wanted to. They don't fake kindness, because they've forgiven the part of them that wasn't kind. They don't collapse under shame because they no longer live in hiding. Tonight, maybe there's a feeling you've been avoiding. Maybe it's rage, maybe it's envy, maybe it's grief dressed up as control. Whatever it is, it won't go away just because you ignore it. Jung would say, sit with it, not to feed it, but to hear it, to learn what part of you was left behind, and what kind of love it needed to return. You will not find peace in pretending, you will find peace in reclaiming. So, ask yourself, if I stopped running from my shadow, what parts of me might finally be free to live in the light? Epictetus and the discipline of acceptance. There are things you can control, and there are things you cannot. But most of your suffering comes from trying to control the second you. Waste energy wondering why they left, why it happened, why life didn't follow the script you memorized. You protest reality like it's a betrayal, but it isn't. It's just being itself. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher born a slave, understood this more than most. He had no wealth, no power, no title, and yet, he said, there is only one way to happiness. Cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. He didn't mean give up. He meant wake up. There's a peace that comes when you finally stop arguing with reality, when you stop saying, it shouldn't be like this, and start asking, what can I do now that it is? You can't stop the storm, but you can stop making yourself small beneath it. You can't change the past, but you can change your relationship to it. You can't control what others think, but you can choose how much power you give their opinions. This is the Stoic divide, the line between what is yours and what never was. Your thoughts, yours. Your actions, yours. Your values, yours their approval. Not yours, the economy, not yours. How long someone stays, not yours. But here's the twist. When you stop clinging to what you can't control, you reclaim the energy to transform what you can. You stop spiraling and start acting. You stop wishing and start living. You stop chasing and start creating. Epictetus believed we should train our minds like athletes train their bodies, with discipline, with repetition, with clarity, because left untrained, your mind will try to fix the unfixable. It will obsess over how it should have been. It will search endlessly for justice in an unjust world. But when you practice acceptance, true, grounded, unapologetic acceptance, you don't become passive. You become powerful because you're no longer wasting your fight on things that don't fight back. Imagine the weight that would lift if you stopped needing everything to go your way before you let yourself be at peace. That's what Epictetus taught. Freedom doesn't come from control. It comes from surrendering what was never yours to carry. Tonight, scan your body. Where are you holding the tension of control? Is it in your shoulders, trying to carry other people's expectations? Is it in your chest, gripping a regret you can't rewrite? Is it in your mind, rehearsing a future you can't predict? Exhale, let it go. You are still responsible, but only for your part. You are still powerful, but only where your hands can reach. So ask yourself, now, if I gave up the fight to control what's not mine, what kind of peace has been waiting quietly to meet me where I actually am? Seneca and the tragedy of wasted time. You say you don't have time. You say life is moving too fast. You say you'll start healing later, when things calm down. But later never comes. And that's the quiet tragedy. Because what's being stolen from you isn't just your peace, it's your life, Seneca. Roman Stoic, and one of the most urgent voices in philosophy, saw this clearly. He watched powerful men panic on their deathbeds, not because they feared dying, but because they realized they never truly lived. "It is not that we have a short time to live," he wrote, "but that we waste a lot of it. You don't mean to waste it. You're just distracted. You're just trying to keep up. You're just scrolling, just checking, just surviving. But the result is the same. Days dissolve into routines. Dreams are delayed into fantasy. And presence becomes a luxury you never feel wealthy enough to afford." Seneca wasn't moralizing. He was pleading. Don't confuse activity with aliveness. Don't mistake a full schedule for a full soul. He knew that time is the one thing you cannot borrow, replace, or rewind. And yet it's what people guard the least. They say yes when they mean no. They give hours to things that drain them. They live in anticipation of a future they're too exhausted to meet when it arrives. You want to become mentally unbreakable? Then start by becoming intolerant of wasting your life. Not by doing more, but by asking what actually matters. What would remain if I subtracted everything done out of guilt, fear, or obligation? Seneca wasn't against pleasure. He wasn't against ambition. He was against sleepwalking. He believed that life, even when short, can be wide, deep, meaningful, if you are awake for it. So tonight, pause, not to feel guilty, but to feel the truth. Your time is not just slipping, it's sacred, and every moment you spend being who you're not. For things you don't love, in roles that don't fit, is a theft. Not from your calendar, but from your soul. The clock doesn't ask for your permission. It moves without it. But you can choose to speak the truth even if it trembles, to do the thing even if it fails, to rest without apology, to begin not when you're ready, but when you're done waiting. And if fear asks you to delay again, say what Seneca would have said, if not now, when? Diogenes and the freedom of needing less. You've been told your worth is measured by what you have, how much you earn, how much you know, how much you can prove, and so you chase. One more achievement, one more purchase, one more reason to be seen as enough. But it never ends, does it? Because if your self-respect is built on having, you'll always fear losing. Diogenes, the strange, rebellious, and radical philosopher of ancient Greece, had a different idea. He owned almost nothing, slept in a barrel, laughed at kings, mocked polite society, and yet he was free because he didn't need anything to feel whole. He has the most who is most content with the least. He said, that doesn't mean you have to renounce everything. It means you have to question everything. Who told you that success means more? That confidence needs validation? That peace comes from possession? Diogenes stripped away the noise. He wasn't admired, he was feared, because people fear the person who doesn't need their approval. That kind of self-possession is dangerous and rare. Imagine waking up tomorrow and feeling no pressure to impress, no need to perform, no hunger for the next thing to fill the silence. What's left? Stillness, freedom, clarity, not because the world changed, but because your relationship to it did. Diogenes believed that civilization had made people sick, addicted to status, disconnected from nature, ashamed of their bodies, afraid to speak honestly, so he lived as a kind of mirror, a walking contradiction, a living protest. He reminded people that much of what they chased was not necessary, just inherited. You don't need to go live in a barrel, but you do need to know this: what you can walk away from no longer owns you, the less you need to prove, the more space you have to be. Mentally unbreakable doesn't mean you have more. It means you've made peace with less. Because the person who depends on nothing can't be blackmailed by loss. So tonight, ask yourself, gently but honestly, what have I been calling success that's really just a fear of being unloved, unseen, or ordinary? And if I let that go, what kind of wild, peaceful, and present life might I finally be free to live? Nietzsche and the will to carry your own fire. Life is not fair. You already know that. The innocent suffer. The cruel succeed. And sometimes, the darkness doesn't pass when you expect it to. But what do you do with that truth? Some people collapse. Some people numb themselves. Some people pretend. And then, some people transform. Friedrich Nietzsche was not a comforting thinker. He didn't offer easy answers. He offered fire. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And also, what does not kill me makes me stronger. You've heard that second quote before. It's been printed on mugs and shirts and motivational posters. But when Nietzsche said it, he meant something deeper than grit. He meant, to become strong, you must suffer consciously. You must stare into your pain, not to be a victim, but to metabolize it into power. Nietzsche saw life as a forge, and the ones who became unbreakable were the ones who chose to walk into the fire again and again, not for punishment, but for transformation. He called this the Bermensch, not a perfect being, but a self-created one. Someone who doesn't wait for salvation, who doesn't hide behind morality, who doesn't need permission to become who they are. You become unbreakable not when you avoid chaos, but when you learn to dance with it. Nietzsche saw suffering not as an interruption to life, but as its rawest expression. He asked us to embrace it, to affirm it, to look at the tragedy and say, yes, this too belongs. This is amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not because it's easy, but because it's yours. Can you love what happened to you? Not excuse it, not romanticize it, but accept it as the raw material for your becoming. Nietzsche didn't believe in numbing your darkness. He believed in integrating it, owning it, even creating from it, to write your philosophy in blood. Tonight, maybe you feel like you've failed. Maybe you're exhausted by trying to do the right thing. Maybe you're angry at life for not rewarding your effort. Good, that's your fuel, that's your test. You wanted peace, but maybe what you need is power, the kind that can only be forged by walking alone into the truth, with no guarantee of applause. So take that pain, that regret, that humiliation, that ache that won't go away, and build something from it. Write the book, tell the story, start the movement, speak the thing that no one else dares say, because in a world that wants you tame, quiet, grateful for scraps, your fire is the greatest rebellion. So ask yourself, if I stop waiting for life to be gentle, how much of my soul is ready to rise and become its own kind of force? The Buddha and the strength of letting go. You've been taught to hold on, to grip tighter, to fix what breaks, to protect what you love at all costs. But what if true strength is not in holding tighter, but in letting go? The Buddha taught one of the most difficult truths. Attachment is the root of suffering. Not love, not desire, not connection. Attachment, the belief that you must have something or someone to be okay, that your peace depends on outcomes, that your joy is only safe if the world bends to your will. But the world doesn't bend. People leave, plans fail, bodies weaken, seasons change, and if your inner life is tied to what's outside you, then your peace will always be on a leash. The Buddha wasn't cold. He wasn't asking you not to care. He was offering something gentler than clinging presence, to love fully, but without possession, to grieve fully, but without collapse, to give fully, but without resentment. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Imagine how much pain you've carried, not because something hurt, but because you couldn't let it end. You replay the moment, you rewrite the words, you rebuild the fantasy, and each time you bleed a little more. But what if you stopped asking it to be different? What if, just for tonight, you said, "It happened, and I'm still here"? That doesn't mean it was okay. It means you're ready to begin again. The Buddha called this impermanence. Everything changes, nothing lasts. And that truth, while painful, is also liberating, because it means your suffering is temporary, your shame is temporary, your loneliness, even that will pass through if you let it. You don't become unbreakable by holding everything together. You become unbreakable by learning how to release. Release the need to be understood. Release the need for closure. Release the version of you that only knew how to survive. And in that release, something new grows, something softer and stronger. Not because you forced it, but because you made space. So tonight, breathe. Feel your body holding tension that belongs. To yesterday, feel your mind holding arguments that no longer matter. Feel your heart holding versions of love that no longer fit who you're becoming. And ask, if I let go of everything that is no longer aligned with peace, who might I become? On the other side of that silence. Viktor Frankl and the meaning you choose. Some things break you. Some days it feels like the weight of what you've lived through is heavier than your future. You try to stay positive. You try to think your way out. But the world doesn't always reward effort sometimes. It just hurts. And that's where meaning steps in. Not as an answer, but as an anchor. Viktor Frankl, neurologist, psychiatrist, Holocaust survivor, wrote something that saved lives, including his own. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. He was imprisoned in Auschwitz, watched family members die, was starved, beaten, dehumanized, and yet he refused to let his soul become a prisoner, because he believed that humans are not destroyed by suffering, they are destroyed by a lack of meaning within it. Frankl called this logotherapy, the idea that healing begins not with comfort, but with purpose. If you have a why, you can endure almost anyhow, and that why isn't always big. It's not always about changing the world. Sometimes it's as quiet as, I want to see my child again. I want to write one sentence of truth. I want to honor the life I've been given, even when it feels like ashes. We've built a culture obsessed with feeling good. But Frankl knew you don't always get to feel good. You do get to choose to be useful, and in that choice, you become something the world can't touch. Meaning doesn't erase pain, it redeems it. Tonight, maybe you're carrying something that hasn't made sense yet. A betrayal, a loss, a silence you can't seem to break. Don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. And listen for the voice that says, there's still something left in me that can serve, that can grow, that can rise. You are not your wounds. You are not your past. You are the author of what it means, and when you choose a meaning that aligns with love, with resilience, with contribution, your story shifts, not because the pain is gone, but because it finally has a place to go. So ask yourself, if I made this pain part of my purpose, what kind of strength might be born in me that no suffering could ever erase? Marcus Aurelius, and the stillness within the storm. Your life feels loud sometimes. The world presses in, notifications, expectations, fears, regrets. You carry it all, hoping one day it will get quieter. But Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, knew the truth. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Stillness isn't found in escaping the world. Stillness is built inside you, when you train your mind to become a place where the noise no longer decides who you are. He was the most powerful man on earth, leading armies, managing plagues, burying children, betrayed by friends, surrounded by chaos. And still, he wrote every night in secret, to himself, reminding his own heart how to stay grounded when the world trembled. He never meant for those words to be published. They were not performances, they were rituals. A man speaking to his own soul. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. He didn't write from comfort. He wrote from fire. He understood that nothing, no status, no success, no praise could protect you from pain. So instead, he taught, strength lies in how you respond. He reminded himself, and now you, that the mind is the only thing that cannot be truly taken. People can insult you. They can reject you. You can lose everything you've built, but no one can force you to believe a thought you do not choose, and that is where peace begins. You don't need to control the storm. You only need to stop letting it dictate your mind. Tonight, sit with the stillness that waits beneath your thoughts. There's pain. Let it rise. There's confusion. Let it pass through. There's noise. Acknowledge it without bowing to it, and underneath all of it, you'll feel something ancient, something unshaken. Marcus called it your inner citadel, a fortress inside you that no external storm can breach unless you open the gate, and when you practice entering it, again and again, with patience and honesty and courage, you stop reacting, you stop clinging, you stop needing the world to be calm before you can be. That is what makes you unbreakable. Not that life gets easier, but that you become more still. So ask yourself, if I stopped waiting for peace to arrive from the outside, could I begin to build it brick by quiet brick inside my own breath, starting now? Heraclitus and the power of becoming. You're not who you were yesterday, and you won't be the same tomorrow. But still, you try to hold on to identities, to beliefs, to routines, as if permanence will save you. But Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher of change, saw something that most fear to admit. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. Everything is in motion. The world, your mind, your pain, your joy. You are not a fixed object. You are a living process, constantly unfolding, constantly becoming. So why does it hurt so much to change? Because you mistake comfort for identity. You cling to old versions of yourself, even when they no longer fit. You believe the person who survived is the only person you can be. But Heraclitus challenges that. He says, you do not have a self. You are in the act of shaping it always. This isn't chaos, it's freedom, because it means you are not bound to your past. You are not sentenced to repeat the same pain. You are not locked inside the story they gave you. You are allowed to dissolve and reappear, different, every scar, every mistake. Every shattered expectation is not the end of your identity, but the raw material of your next one. This is not about forgetting the past. It's about flowing with it, letting it carve you into someone wiser, deeper, truer. But that only happens if you stop resisting the current, if you let go of needing life to be linear, needing yourself to make sense, needing others to understand who you're becoming. Because becoming is rarely visible at first. It happens in the in-between. The moment you stop pretending, the second you stop performing, the breath you take before deciding, I'm not going back. Heraclitus invites you into the river, not to drown, but to move, to trust that the flow is not against you, but shaping you in ways your mind can't yet measure. So tonight, instead of forcing stability, invite fluidity. Instead of asking, who am I? Try asking, who am I becoming? Now that I've stopped holding back the parts of me that were made for motion. Lao Tzu and the Strength of Softness. You've been told that strength looks like control, that to be unbreakable is to be hard, sharp, unyielding. But what if that's the very thing that shatters you? Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, an author of the Tao Te Ching, offered a different truth, a quieter one. Water is fluid, soft, and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft, and yielding will overcome. Whatever is rigid and hard, what you've been calling weakness, may be your greatest strength. We think we must push, force, dominate. But what does that create? Exhaustion, resentment, resistance. You don't become mentally unbreakable by bracing yourself against life. You become unbreakable by learning how to bend with it. Lao Tzu believed that the Tao, the way, is not something you conquer, but something you align with. That true power is not found in resistance, but in harmony. The world is not asking you to harden. It's asking you to listen, to flow, to respond with clarity instead of control. Water doesn't panic. It doesn't try to hold its shape. It finds the path of least resistance and transforms everything in its way. Imagine if you lived that way, instead of obsessing over the perfect plan. You watched, felt, responded. Instead of needing every moment to be understood, you allowed it to unfold. Instead of bracing for pain, you softened around it, and it passed through you, instead of destroying you. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. The willow tree survives the storm, not because it's tough, but because it bows. So tonight, feel the places in you that have turned to stone, the expectations that weigh you down, the habits that no longer breathe, the armor that no longer fits, and ask, what if I don't need to fight this moment? What if I just need to flow with it, and trust that the softest part of me is already stronger than I've ever been told? Epictetus and the discipline of control. You want peace, but your mind feels like a battlefield. Why did they do that? Why is this happening? Why don't they understand? You try to fix it all. You chase closure. You fight to make sense of chaos, and it breaks you, not because you're weak, but because you're trying to control what was never yours to hold. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher born into slavery, offered one of the simplest, most powerful truths in all of philosophy. Some things are in our control, and others are not. That's it. That's the key. The person who learns to live by that truth is already free, already powerful, already unbreakable. It doesn't matter how unfair life is. It doesn't matter how loud the world becomes. If your focus stays on what you can control, no one can touch your peace. Epictetus lost his freedom, his family, his health, but he never lost his mind, because he knew you were not your circumstances. You are your response. That is what you own, not people's opinions, not the outcome of your efforts, not the past or the future, but this moment, this breath, this choice, and that is everything. But here's the hard part. Letting go of control feels like failure. It feels like giving up, like surrender, but it's not surrender to the world. It's surrender to reality, and that kind of surrender is the beginning of real power. Because now you have energy again. Now you have clarity again. Now you can act from strength, not desperation. So tonight, make a list in your mind. 2 columns. 1, what is truly mine to carry. 2, what is outside of me, no matter how much I want to hold it. And when you're done, take a deep breath and release the second list. Burn it, bless it, but stop bleeding for what is not yours. You were not born to fix everyone. You were not born to predict every outcome. You were born to live fully, mindfully, wisely, within the small sacred space of what you can control. And from that space, you become a force, because the person who no longer argues with reality is the person who cannot be shaken. So ask yourself, honestly, what pain in my life has stayed alive only because I refused to stop trying to control what was never mine? Socrates and the strength of not knowing. You've spent your life trying to be certain, to know enough, to be right, to avoid the fear of being exposed, as lest you read, you study, you prepare. You tighten your grip on knowledge because not knowing feels like weakness. But Socrates, one of the wisest men in history, said something that shattered that illusion. The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. This wasn't false humility. It was power. Socrates wasn't interested in looking smart. He was interested in seeking truth. And truth, real truth, doesn't live in certainty. It lives in questions. It lives in the uncomfortable pause between answers. It lives in the courage to say, I don't know, but I want to learn. You've been taught to perform competence, to fear ignorance, to pretend, but pretending hardens you. It makes you defensive, closed, brittle, and that's not strength. Mental strength is not in having all the answers. It's in being willing to live inside the questions. Socrates would walk through the streets of Athens, asking questions that made people uncomfortable. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to wake them up to their contradictions, to their borrowed beliefs, to their fear of looking foolish. He believed that philosophy wasn't about theories, it was about how you live, and the person who could question without fear was already freer than the person who needed to be right. You want to be mentally unbreakable? Start here. Be teachable, be curious. Be humble enough to question your most precious beliefs, not because they're wrong, but because you want to be true. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth and asking many questions, but he drank the hemlock calmly, because even in death he remained loyal to what he valued most: wisdom over comfort, truth over approval, curiosity over certainty. So tonight, let go of the mask of knowing. Let go of the exhausting need to have it all figured out. You don't have to know everything. You just have to remain open. That openness, that's the muscle that doesn't break. So ask yourself, what might I finally learn about the world and about myself if I stopped being afraid of the answer? I don't know yet. Aristotle and the habit of inner excellence. You think strength is a reaction, something you summon in crisis, something that rises when the world collapses around you. But what if real strength isn't a sudden event, but a daily discipline? Aristotle, the great student of Plato and teacher to kings, believed something powerful and quietly radical. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. You don't become mentally unbreakable by waiting for the storm to arrive. You become unbreakable by training your character when things are calm, because when chaos comes, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall back on your preparation. Aristotle saw the self not as a fixed identity, but as a work in progress, crafted by action, choice, repetition. Every decision you make is carving you into something. The words you speak, the thoughts you feed, the responses you choose when no one is watching. You're not just living, you're becoming, and that becoming is built through habits of the soul. Courage, temperance, justice, patience, not grand gestures, but small commitments practiced in the quiet, when it doesn't feel urgent, because excellence doesn't come from motivation. It comes from virtue, a deep alignment between what you believe and how you live. Aristotle believed this kind of virtue was the highest form of human fulfillment, not wealth, not pleasure, not recognition, but the feeling of inner congruence, where your actions match your truth, where your character is stronger than your circumstances. That's where peace begins, not in outcomes, but in integrity. So tonight, reflect on the person you're rehearsing, because every thought you repeat, every habit you keep, every emotion you justify, it's rehearsing something. What are you becoming? You want to be resilient, then train it. Be honest when it's easier to lie. Be calm when it's easier to rage. Be kind when it's easier to withhold. Be focused when it's easier to drift, not for approval, not for applause, but because you are building a self you won't abandon, even when life does. So ask yourself, if I became nothing more than the habits I practice every day, would I still be proud of the person I've become when the storm finally arrives? Seneca and the art of suffering well. You try to avoid pain. That's natural. You schedule it away, medicate it, distract from it. But what if the secret to becoming unbreakable is not found in escaping suffering, but in suffering well? Seneca, the Roman Stoic and advisor to emperors, understood that suffering was inevitable. But despair, that was optional. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, he wrote. And in that sentence, he opened a door most never walk through. The door to perspective. Seneca knew that pain is not the problem. It's our relationship to it. It's the meaning we attach, the resistance we create, the fear we multiply inside our heads. A bruise can become a wound if you keep pressing it, and a moment of hardship becomes unbearable when you rehearse it. 1,000 times in your mind, he taught that you don't conquer suffering by pretending it's not there. You conquer it by preparing for it, welcoming it, studying it. So when it comes, and it will, you're not caught off guard. You're already fortified. That's the Stoic way, not cold, not emotionless, but disciplined in thought. Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort, sleeping without blankets, eating plain food, imagining loss. Why? Not to punish himself, but to remind himself, even if I lose what I love, I will not lose myself. That's the core of being unbreakable. The quiet knowledge that no matter what is taken from you, your dignity, your mind, your values, those are yours to keep. And even in exile, even facing death, Seneca wrote letters of wisdom, not bitterness, because even when everything outside of him was crumbling, his inner world remained intact. You don't need to fake joy when life hurts. You just need to remember, pain is not your enemy. Fear of pain is so tonight. Instead of wishing the pain would vanish, try sitting with it like a teacher. What is it showing you? What belief is it shaking? What illusion is it burning away? Suffering doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're alive. And if you suffer well with courage, with curiosity, with grace, then you are already stronger than those who run from their own reflection. So ask yourself, what part of me is still trying to outrun discomfort, instead of turning toward it and discovering that even in suffering, I still have power. Diogenes and the power of needing less. You've been taught to want more money, more approval, more control, more peace, but only if it looks a certain way. And so, the more you chase, the more you suffer. But Diogenes, the wild philosopher of ancient Greece, lived a life that defied all of it. He owned nothing, slept in a barrel, mocked emperors, and yet he was free in a way few people ever are. He has the most who is most content with the least. Diogenes wasn't poor in spirit. He was rich in clarity. He stripped away every lie society told him, that your worth is in your wealth, that your happiness depends on others, that dignity requires status. He laughed at it, not out of cruelty, but out of refusal to live inside cages, built by other people's fears. When Alexander the Great found Diogenes and asked if he could grant him a wish, Diogenes replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." He didn't need a throne. He didn't need a following. He didn't even need to be remembered. He only needed this, to be true, to be unwound, to need nothing but reality. There's power in that. Not asceticism for its own sake, but detachment from illusions, because the less you need, the less they can use against you. You stop performing. You stop negotiating your soul for scraps of belonging. You stop begging life to be different and start meeting it where it is. Diogenes reminds you, unbreakable isn't about being the strongest. It's about needing the least from the outside, because the person who can walk away from the crowd without losing themselves is the one who cannot be bought, broken, or bent. So tonight, take inventory. What have you been clinging to? Not because it feeds you, but because you were told it proves something. Strip it back. Ask yourself, if I stopped needing approval, validation, luxury, or applause, what would remain in me that is solid, sufficient, and finally free? Zeno and the paradox of progress. You think you're not moving fast enough. You feel behind. Everyone else seems ahead, accomplishing more, understanding more, becoming more. So you rush, you compare, you panic, and still, you feel stuck. But Zeno of Elea, a Greek philosopher known for his paradoxes, offers a truth that sounds absurd at first, and then becomes liberating. Motion is an illusion. One of his most famous paradoxes. If you want to reach a destination, you must first get halfway there, then half of that, then half of that again. And if you keep dividing the distance, you'll never actually arrive. There will always be more to cover. At first, this seems hopeless. But look deeper. What Zeno reveals isn't just a puzzle, it's a reflection of your mind. You believe you're only worthy once you arrive, once you've healed, once you've figured it all out, once you've proven yourself. But there's always more to do, more to become, more distance between you and the image in your head. You're chasing a finish line that moves with you, So, maybe the problem isn't your pace, it's the illusion that there's a perfect endpoint at all. Zeno teaches you this. Arrival is a myth. Becoming is infinite. Every step forward is both progress and not enough, and that's okay. Because the goal isn't to finish the journey, it's to walk it well, to stay present, to breathe inside the process, to stop measuring yourself against imagined perfection. Mental strength doesn't come from arriving, it comes from staying faithful to the path even when the end is unclear. You become unbreakable, not when you're done, but when you're no longer crushed by the fact that you're not. So tonight, let go of the finish line, let go of the voice that says you should. Be farther, you are not behind, you are not late. You are exactly where your becoming is happening. Ask yourself, if I no longer believed that progress must be visible, impressive, or complete, could I finally allow myself to rest inside the motion I've already made? Aurelius and the inner fortress. You think strength is something you perform, a face you wear, a pose you hold when the world is watching. But Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic thinker, believed strength was something else entirely. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This isn't just advice, it's a worldview, a declaration of inner sovereignty. Marcus ruled an empire, but spent every night writing to himself, not to impress, not to persuade, but to remember. The real battle is always inward, because no matter how powerful you become, you will face insult, betrayal, illness, death. None of it can be controlled. What can be controlled? Your interpretation, your integrity, your ability to return to yourself. He called this place within you the inner citadel, a fortress no enemy can breach, no insult can penetrate, no tragedy can destroy. This fortress isn't built with arrogance. It's built with awareness, self-command, radical honesty. It is a place where your worth is untouched by circumstance. But here's the truth, no one tells you. It takes work, daily, silent, invisible work, to build the discipline of calm, to stay upright in chaos, to walk away from the noise and return to the stillness where your real self waits. It's not glamorous, it's not praised, but it is freedom. The fortress of the mind isn't loud, it's quiet confidence. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to react to everything. You don't need to crumble just because the world does. You simply breathe, you center, you respond from depth, not desperation. So tonight, don't scroll, don't perform, don't chase affirmation. Go inward, re-enter your fortress, clean its walls, sit in its silence, and remind yourself they can take your job, your reputation, your plans, but they cannot take the calm watcher behind your thoughts. Ask yourself, what part of me have I allowed the world to hijack? That was always meant to be my sacred, silent stronghold. Heraclitus and the fire that transforms. You want stability, a plan, a version of yourself that stays whole, consistent, untouchable, but everything keeps changing. Your body, your beliefs, your relationships, even your dreams. And it frightens you, because you've been taught that peace means permanence, and that transformation is a threat. But Heraclitus, the ancient philosopher of flux, saw it differently. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. You are not broken because you're changing. You're alive because you are. Heraclitus believed that all of life is in motion, that fire, not stone, is the fundamental element of existence, that everything flows, everything burns, everything becomes, and, rather than resist that fire, you are meant to move with it, to let it change you, without letting it destroy you. But change scares you, doesn't it? It means letting go. It means watching old versions of yourself die. It means not being able to predict what's coming next. But, Heraclitus reminds us, it's not change that breaks you. It's clinging to what no longer fits. You cannot stay the same and still grow. You cannot keep everything and still evolve. You cannot become unbreakable by staying unchanged. Fire purifies. It tests. It reveals what's real. And if you let it, it will carve away everything false, everything borrowed, bloated, brittle, until only what's essential remains. You, not the you others wanted, not the you rehearsed, but the you that adapts, endures, and stays rooted even as everything else moves. This is the paradox. You become solid by being willing to melt. You become strong by learning how to burn. So tonight, stop mourning who you were. Stop fearing who you might become. Let the river carry you. Let the fire refine you. And ask yourself, what have I been gripping so tightly that it's now keeping me from becoming who I was always meant to be on the other side of this fire?